She was just lying there, a German Shepherd mother, with three tiny puppies curled against her body, abandoned on the side of a rural road, weak, shaking, and barely able to lift her head. Most drivers passed without even slowing down, but one man did something different. And what happened after that, between this broken mother, her babies, and the stranger who stopped, will stay with you forever. The sun was setting over the dusty back roads of northern Arizona. Warm orange light flickered between the trees, painting long shadows across the pavement. It was the kind of evening that felt peaceful, unless you were looking closely, and Mike Walker was. He wasn't a rescue worker, not a vet, not an animal control officer, just a guy with an old truck, a toolbox in the back, and a habit of paying attention. He'd taken this route 100 times before, shortcut to the hardware store, past cornfields and overgrown lots, but something in the ditch caught his eye. At first, it looked like a pile of debris. Then it moved. He slowed down, pulled over, opened his door and stepped out, boots crunching gravel. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. There she was, a female German Shepherd, curled up so tightly around three small puppies that it looked like one breathing body. She didn't bark, didn't growl, didn't move. She just looked at him with eyes that had already given up. Her ribs were visible, her fur matted with dirt and dried milk. One of the puppies, a black and tan female, was latched on, nursing weakly. The others were sleeping against her, too tired to notice anything else. Mike took a slow step forward. "Hey, Mama," he said softly. Her eyes didn't leave his, but her ears twitched. It wasn't trust, but it wasn't fear either. It was surrender. He crouched down, carefully avoiding sudden moves. From this distance, he could see her front paw was swollen, probably injured. One of the pups let out a faint, raspy whimper. There was no collar, no food, no water, and judging by the condition of her and the pups, they had likely been there for days. Mike stood, walked back to his truck, and returned with a bottle of water and a towel. He poured some into a plastic lid and set it down near her. She didn't drink, but one of the puppies wobbled over and began lapping at it. Mike held his breath. Then, finally, the mother moved. Just a little. She nudged the lid with her nose and began to drink. That was enough. He called his sister Megan, who worked part-time at a local shelter. "I need help," he said. "I found a shepherd with pups. She's not aggressive, but she's in bad shape." Within 30 minutes, Megan arrived in her Jeep, gloves on, crate in the back. When she saw the mother dog, she froze. "Oh my God, Mike, she's a skeleton." Mike didn't respond. He was too focused on the way the mother's eyes never left her babies, even as Megan approached. With a slow, careful hand, they lifted the puppies into a blanket-lined box. The mother didn't fight. She stood, barely, and limped after them. And that's when it happened. As they reached the car, the mother collapsed. Right there, on the grass. But not from pain, from relief. She had made it, and now, it was someone else's turn to carry them forward. The shelter wasn't full, but it wasn't ready either. They had crates, they had food, they had the will to help. But what they didn't have was space for a nursing mother with three tiny lives depending on her every breath. Megan stood in the intake room staring at the clipboard, biting the corner of her lip. "She can't go in general population," she said to Mike. He was sitting cross-legged on the floor, the box of puppies beside him, the mother, barely standing, leaning her head against his knee. "I'll pay for a quiet room," he said. Megan looked at him. "This isn't a hotel, Mike." "I know," he said. "But she'll die if she's surrounded by noise and chaos." She looked down at the mother again. The dog hadn't barked once. Not in the truck, not during the exam, not now. Just that steady, haunted stare. They cleaned her wounds as gently as possible. The front paw wasn't broken, just badly inflamed, probably from infection or a deep thorn. They cleaned her ears, brushed mats from her fur, and removed a few tiny ticks from behind her legs. She never growled, never yelped, but when Megan tried to check her eyes, the dog suddenly flinched hard, backing into the corner of the room, teeth bared, not snapping, but warning. Mike instinctively stepped in. He didn't touch her, just knelt slowly beside her. She looked at him, and after a few seconds, relaxed. They named her Sasha, a name that sounded strong but soft, like she could remember it without fear. Her puppies were only about 2 weeks old, eyes still barely open, bellies soft but thin. 2 females, 1 male. Megan wrote their intake tags. Sasha, adult. Mir Feinbau Ward 5-year German Shepherd. Tiny, F, black and tan. Poppy, F, reddish brown paws. Bear, M, slight limp. Right hind leg. That night, they kept Sasha in the medical room on a mattress lined with clean blankets. Mike stayed with her. He didn't ask. He just showed up with a sleeping bag, a flashlight, and a small box of dog biscuits. Sasha didn't eat, but she lay down close enough that their shoulders touched. The pups nursed quietly, Sasha's body curled protectively around them, and for the first time, she closed her eyes. Around 3:30 a.m., Mike woke up to a sound. Not barking, not whining, just breathing, fast, shallow breathing. He turned the flashlight slowly. Sasha was sitting upright, staring at the wall. Her whole body trembled. He sat up. Sasha? She didn't look at him. She was locked in something else, something far away. He didn't reach for her. He just whispered, "You're safe now. No one's gonna hurt you here." And then she made a sound. Not a bark, not a growl. A soft, broken whimper. Like something that had been trapped inside her chest for weeks had finally cracked open. Mike didn't sleep the rest of the night. He sat with her, not moving, just being there. He knew that whatever Sasha had lived through, she hadn't just been abandoned, she'd been hurt, used, then thrown away. But now she had a name, a bed, her babies, and someone who didn't flinch when she broke. But Sasha wasn't out of danger yet, because the next morning, one of the puppies stopped nursing, tiny. She was breathing, but just barely. Megan placed her in a towel. Mike held Sasha back gently as the mother tried to follow, and Sasha did something no one expected. She licked Megan's hand. Once. Softly. As if to say, "Please, save her." The moment Megan wrapped Tiny in the towel, the energy in the room shifted. The puppy was limp, her little paws curled in, her breathing shallow, almost imperceptible. Sasha stood near the blanket nest where her other 2 pups squirmed gently. She didn't move, didn't cry, but her eyes followed Megan with laser focus. She knew. "We need to get her under heat," Megan said quickly. "And glucose." Mike stepped aside, watching as Megan moved with practiced calm toward the exam table. She placed Tiny under a heat lamp and gently opened her mouth with a gloved pinky finger. "She's cold," Megan whispered, "and weak, probably fading from dehydration." She pulled a small syringe from the cabinet, measured glucose with care. "She's too little for a feeding tube," she added, mostly to herself. Mike stood by the door. He could feel Sasha behind him. "She's watching you," he said quietly. "I know," Megan replied. "She's not just a mother, she's a survivor." The shelter didn't have a neonatal unit, but Megan had enough experience to improvise. She swaddled Tiny in a flannel cloth, gently rubbed her sides to stimulate circulation, and administered a few drops of sugar solution every 15 minutes. Sasha remained silent the whole time. After an hour, there was a twitch. Tiny stretched one paw. Her breathing steadied slightly. "She's not out of the woods," Megan said, "but she's fighting." Mike turned to look at Sasha. "I think she gets that from her mom." That night, Tiny was placed in a small incubator built from a crate, heating pad, and towel-lined water bottles. Megan insisted on staying at the shelter to monitor her. Mike stayed too. And Sasha? She refused to leave the corner closest to Tiny's crate. Even though Poppy and Bear cried for her warmth, Sasha lay pressed against the gate, keeping her eyes on her daughter. Around 2 a.m., Megan gently carried Tiny back toward the nest for a brief moment of warmth with the others. Sasha perked up, ears forward, eyes alert. Megan sat on the floor beside her and slowly extended the towel-wrapped pup. And for the first time, Sasha reached out. She licked Tiny's face, then her ears, then nudged her softly into the blanket beside her siblings. Poppy squeaked. Bear nosed closer, and for a moment, just a moment, everything felt whole. Mike leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching the scene. He whispered, "She's doing better because Sasha never gave up on her." Megan nodded. Sasha never left her, not even for a second. But just as they began to breathe again, they noticed something else. Sasha wasn't eating. The food bowl was untouched. Water barely sipped. Mike knelt beside her again, this time looking more closely. He lifted her lip gently, revealing pale gums. "Megan," he said, "I think she's crashing." Megan rushed over. "She gave everything to her puppies," she muttered. "Everything." They took Sasha's vitals, fever rising, heart rate low. She'd been holding on with adrenaline and instinct. Now, with the pups safe, she was letting go. Megan turned to Mike. "We need IV fluids, now." Mike didn't wait. He loaded Sasha into the crate with gentle hands, set the heat pad on the floor of his truck, and raced toward the 24-hour emergency clinic 2 towns over. Sasha didn't fight the ride. She rested her head on the blanket and stared forward in silence. Mike kept one hand on the crate the whole way. "You're not done," he told her. "You brought them this far. You don't get to quit now." He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just spoke like she could hear him. And in that moment, maybe she could. Because when they reached the clinic and the techs opened the crate, Sasha stood up. Weak, trembling, but standing. And for the first time since he found her, Mike saw her tail move. Just once. Barely. But it moved. The emergency vet clinic wasn't warm. It smelled like sanitizer and wet fur. It buzzed with fluorescent light and late-night urgency. But in room 3, under a folded fleece blanket, Sasha was alive. She hadn't moved much after they placed the IV. The fluids dripped slowly into her leg. Her body was curled tightly, her ribs rising with each shaky breath. But her eyes, they never closed. They stayed on Mike. He sat in the corner, hunched in a plastic chair, jacket half off, coffee untouched. His eyes were bloodshot. He didn't speak, didn't fidget, just watched her the same way she watched him. The vet came in around 5 a.m. A woman named Dr. Haley, mid-50s, sharp, no nonsense. She reviewed the chart, glanced at the monitors, then knelt beside Sasha's crate. "She's severely malnourished," she said. "Her body's in full depletion mode." Mike nodded. "She was keeping her pups alive," he said. Every drop went to them. Dr. Haley glanced up. "She's strong," she said. "Most wouldn't have made it." By morning, Sasha was stable. Not energetic, not safe, but stable. They kept her for observation, but by the next afternoon, She stood up on her own, trembling, slow, but on her own. Mike returned to the shelter that evening with Sasha in the back seat, this time in a softer crate lined with her pup's blankets. When they pulled in, Megan was waiting at the door. "You weren't supposed to take her with you," she said, arms crossed, but not angry. "She's calmer with me," Mike said, "and I wasn't leaving her behind." They carried her back inside the same quiet medical room. The second her paws hit the blanket-lined floor, her ears twitched, not at the sound of her name, not at a voice, but at the sound of a squeak, tiny. The pups had been fed and cleaned in her absence, but they hadn't been whole. Now Sasha limped toward the box. One step, then two. She reached the side, and all three puppies perked up. Bear wobbled to his feet, Poppy squealed, and Tiny, small, still weak, crawled forward and pressed her nose against her mother's chest. Sasha laid down and exhaled. For the first time in days, she slept. Deeply, fully, with her babies wrapped around her like puzzle pieces. Over the next week, Mike showed up every day. Not as a visitor, but as something else. He brought Sasha boiled chicken in a food processor, carried jugs of warm water, replaced her bedding, sat on the floor beside her crate while she nursed the pups. He didn't rush her, didn't pet her unless she moved first. And one day, she did. He was sitting beside the crate, feeding Poppy with a bottle while Sasha lay resting. He reached to adjust the blanket. That's when Sasha slowly placed her paw on his arm. Not tense, not afraid. Just still. She looked at him. And in that quiet shelter room, surrounded by the hum of heat lamps and puppy whimpers, something shifted. Megan noticed it too. "You know what that means, right?" she said later. Mike looked up. "She's picking you." He shook his head. "I'm not the adopting type." Megan raised an eyebrow. "She doesn't care what type you are. She just knows you stayed." Later that night, Sasha sat up to eat without help. Tiny followed her, tail wiggling. Bear clumsily climbed over the edge of the box. And Poppy chewed on Mike's shoelace until he burst out laughing for the first time in days. The shelter had seen many dogs come and go, but there was something about Sasha and her silent strength that changed the rhythm of the place. Volunteers checked in more. Staff stayed later. Megan started setting up a quiet room program for trauma cases, all because one mother decided to keep fighting. But just as things began to feel normal again, a knock came at the shelter door. An unfamiliar face, a man holding an old photo. And the moment Megan opened it, her expression changed. The knock echoed through the shelter's quiet hallway. Megan looked up from her paperwork, surprised. They were closed for the day. She opened the door slowly. Outside stood a man in his late 50s, tall, weathered, wearing an old flannel shirt and jeans, a faded ball cap tucked under one arm. In his hand, a photograph. "Sorry," he said, voice rough. "I know you're closed. I saw the dog. On your Facebook page." Megan's breath caught. "She yours?" she asked carefully. He held up the photo. It showed a younger version of Sasha, about 2 years younger, lying in the grass of a backyard. Her coat was clean, her eyes bright. Beside her was a girl, maybe 10, blonde, smiling. "My granddaughter named her Jessie," he said. Megan's throat tightened. "She's been through a lot," she said slowly. "I know," he replied, "because I'm the one who gave her away." Megan brought him inside, told him to wait in the front room. She called Mike. He arrived in less than 15 minutes, still in his work boots, face unreadable. The man stood when Mike entered. "I'm Tom," he said. "I don't want trouble. I just want to see her. Mike didn't shake his hand. He looked straight into the man's eyes and said, She nearly died. Tom nodded. I figured. When I gave her to that guy, he said he trained working dogs, that she'd be safe. That's all I knew. Until I saw your post. In the back, Sasha was asleep with her pups curled in the shape of a question mark. Megan knelt beside her and whispered, There's someone here who says he knew you. Sasha lifted her head. Her ears twitched. Megan stood and opened the door to the hallway. Mike walked in, then Tom. Sasha saw him. She didn't move. Tom knelt carefully a few feet away, pulled the photo from his pocket, laid it on the floor. I messed up, girl, he whispered. I didn't know they'd hurt you. Sasha sniffed the air. Her body didn't tense. She didn't growl, but she didn't get closer either. After a long silence, Sasha turned her head and pressed her nose to Mike's hand. That was all he needed to see. He looked at Tom and said quietly, She's not your dog anymore. Tom nodded slowly. I figured, he said. I wanted to tell you something about the girl, my granddaughter. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket, set it on the counter as us. She died. Car accident last year. Jessie was hers. Mike's eyes softened. She was the last thing she loved. I thought maybe it would mean something to see her again. Megan stepped forward. She still flinches when someone lifts a hand too fast, she said. She gave everything to her pups and nearly died. That man you gave her to, he didn't protect her. She survived him. Tom nodded again. His hands shook slightly. I won't bother her again, he said. But thank you for keeping her alive. He turned to go. But just as he reached the door, Sasha stood. Her legs were stiff, her body heavy. But she walked slowly toward Tom. She stopped right beside him, lifted her head, and licked the edge of the photo he was still holding. One time, then turned and walked back to her puppies. No one said anything for a full minute. Then Tom whispered, I think that was goodbye. That night, Mike sat beside Sasha again. She lay with her pups, eyes half closed, tail gently brushing the blanket. You chose us, he said quietly. Sasha didn't move, but her eyes opened, and in them, Mike saw something different. Not fear, not survival, but peace. The days that followed moved slowly, like sunlight creeping across the shelter walls. Sasha gained weight. Her coat began to shine again. The wounds on her paw healed, and most telling of all, she started wagging her tail. Not just once or twice, but when Mike walked in, when Megan brought food, even when the pups fell asleep on her chest and drooled on her fur. The fear hadn't disappeared, but it had been replaced by something new. Trust. The puppies grew fast. Poppy was the loudest, always the first to squeak, the last to fall asleep. Bear followed Sasha everywhere, stumbling over his own feet like a toddler. And Tiny, who had almost died, was now the strongest eater of the three. They were healthy, alive, and soon ready for adoption. Megan sat with Mike outside the shelter one evening, clipboards in hand. We're getting calls, she said. Families asking about the pups. Mike nodded. But not Sasha, he said quietly. Megan sighed. She's older, she's been through a lot, and honestly, most people want a clean slate. Mike looked out across the gravel parking lot. She's not a slate, he said. She's the whole story. That night, Mike stayed later than usual. He lay on the floor with Bear climbing over his chest, Poppy chewing the hem of his flannel, and Tiny asleep between his boots. Sasha watched from the corner, head tilted. Then, slowly, she stood and walked over. Mike didn't move, and Sasha gently lay down beside him, not beside the pups, beside him, her head on his shoulder, her eyes closed. The next morning, Megan placed 3 folders on the desk, each with a name, each with an approved adopter. Poppy, going to a young couple who'd been trying to adopt for months. Bear, to a single mom with a son who loved German shepherds. And Tiny, to a retired vet tech with a quiet home and a soft heart. It was everything they could have asked for. Except one thing. None of them could take Sasha too. Megan looked at Mike. You never applied. He didn't answer at first, then, I didn't want to decide too early. Too early? Megan repeated. She's not a dog you own, he said. She's a life you protect. That afternoon, they did introductions. Each adopter came to meet their puppy, slowly, gently, one at a time. Sasha didn't panic. She stayed close, alert, but calm. And when each pup was picked up, cradled, kissed on the forehead, she didn't growl, she didn't even flinch. She just watched. She knew. By evening, the room was quieter than it had been in weeks. The blankets looked empty, the air still. Sasha stood in the center, confused. Mike knelt down. They're safe, he said. They're loved. She paced once, then lay down on the blanket where they'd last slept. Her tail didn't wag, but she didn't cry either. Mike stayed past lights out that night. Megan found him sitting beside Sasha, both of them quiet, both of them tired. She sat beside him. You know, you've already made your decision. Mike didn't look up. I'm not what people picture when they think of a rescue story, he said. You are to her, Megan replied. That's all that matters. The next morning, Sasha was waiting at the gate before he even opened the door. Not pacing, not barking, just sitting, watching, ready. And that's when Mike finally said it out loud. Let's go home. The drive was quiet. No barking, no whining. Just Sasha in the back seat, curled on a blanket that smelled like her puppies, staring out the window. Mike kept one hand on the steering wheel. The other rested gently on the crate beside him. Every few minutes, he glanced at her through the mirror. And every time, she was watching him too. The house wasn't fancy, single story, wooden porch, a few tools left on the steps from yesterday's work. Mike hadn't cleaned. He hadn't staged it. He just opened the front door and said, This is it. Sasha stepped out slowly. She sniffed the air, then the porch, then the threshold. She hesitated for a second, not out of fear, out of instinct, and then she crossed it. Inside, the living room smelled like sawdust and coffee. The couch was covered in dog blankets, the fireplace unused since winter. Sasha wandered in slow loops, tail lowered but not tucked, taking everything in. Her paw pads clicked softly against the hardwood floor. Mike didn't say much. He just let her explore. And when she finally lay down next to the old recliner, exhaling like she'd carried a lifetime to that spot, he knew. She was home. The days that followed weren't perfect. She barked at the vacuum, refused to eat for 2 meals in a row, tried to dig under the backyard fence once, but every night she curled next to the bed, and every morning she was closer to his side. By the end of the first week, she was sleeping with her head on his boot. By the second, she was waiting by the door every afternoon at 5:30, when his truck pulled in. Mike built her a ramp for the porch, then a small, fenced-in garden where she could sunbathe. He bought a kiddie pool, even though she hated water, and laughed for 5 full minutes the first time she stepped in, realized it was wet, and bolted like a puppy. She was starting to smile. And Mike, he hadn't smiled this much in years. One day, about a month later, Megan stopped by. She brought a small package. Inside was a framed photo. Sasha and her 3 pups, taken on adoption day. In the corner, a small brass plate. Sasha, the one who stayed. Megan smiled. She didn't just survive, Mike. She gave you something back too. He nodded. She gave me peace, he said. She gave me something to take care of that needed me just as much as I needed her. That evening, they sat on the porch together. Mike with a cold drink. Sasha with her head on his knee. The sun slowly melting behind the hills. She had scars, physical and invisible. But she had her place, her quiet, her second chance, and most of all, she had him. Mike looked down at her, running a hand gently over her ears. "You're not just a good girl," he whispered. "You're my girl." And in that moment, Sasha closed her eyes. And for the first time in her entire life, she truly rested. If this story moved you, remember this. Sometimes the animals we rescue end up rescuing us. Sasha wasn't just a stray, she was a mother, a fighter, and a survivor who never gave up. Subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share this story with someone who believes every dog deserves a second chance. Let's keep telling stories that heal.